GoForThe2.com. We're into the Week 8 predictions of the college football season. Let's get right into it. Auburn travels to Arkansas to face the Razorbacks. Arkansas 2 weeks ago pushed Alabama to the limit. They're coming out of a bye week, playing very solid in run support, only giving up 107 rushing yards per game to their opponents. But I like the way this Auburn team is playing right now. They played about 10 days ago on the road in Lexington, pulled out a 30-27 victory over the Wildcats. Solid performance on the road, made plays defensively when they had to. They won the turnover battle, and more importantly, held that Kentucky Wildcat rushing attack to 138 yards on the night. Sean White stepped up, 17-27, 255 yards, made big plays down the middle of the field, and Ricardo Lewis did have 154 receiving yards on the night. I think Auburn's speed is the difference in this game. They're going to run Arkansas from sideline to sideline, and I do think that Auburn gets the road victory this coming Saturday. I think the speed of Auburn is the difference. I like the way they're playing right now under Gus Malzahn. He seemed to right the ship, got a methodical victory over San Jose State 3 weeks ago, put together a solid road effort against Kentucky. I don't like the way Arkansas is reeling right now. I don't think this team is cohesive as a unit, played some very tough ball games, and I'm not sure if Brett Bielema has this team under his belt right now, focused and ready, especially coming out of a bye week. I think Auburn gets a solid road victory this coming Saturday. I think it's high scoring, but in the end, I think Auburn picks up the 44-34 victory over the Razorbacks on the road. Another interesting matchup is Texas and Kansas State. Texas coming out of a bye week. 2 weeks ago, they dominated arch rival Oklahoma in the Red River rivalry game. Defense stepped up, played very well in shutting down the Sooners, held that team to a total of 270 yards of offense. They held Oklahoma to 68 rushing yards on the night. That's a dominant performance by a suspect Texas defense entering that game. They have an extra week, though, to prepare for Kansas State, and to me, Kansas State looks like a tired football team. Played a very solid TCU up-tempo attack 3 weeks ago. Trev Boykin burned that team with his legs, got some big plays as he broke contain around the edge and the perimeter of the Kansas State defense. Kansas State got shut out last week at home by a solid Oklahoma team, 55-0, only had 110 total yards of offense. They now have to go on the road to Austin to face a mobile quarterback in Gerard Hurd. Hurd's mobility is going to be the difference in this matchup, and I like the fact that Charlie Strong and the defense have an extra week to prepare for Kansas State. I think Texas does have the speed to create a lot of mismatch problems for Kansas State, and I think Charlie Strong has its team refocused. I look for a dominant effort out of the Longhorns this coming Saturday. I think they're able to score points on Kansas State, and I do think that they get a decisive victory in Austin, 34-17 over Kansas State. I think it's close early, but in the end, Texas picks up the 34-17 victory at home over Big 12 opponent Kansas State. Another interesting matchup, Boston College, Louisville. Boston College goes on the road to face the Cardinals. Cardinals played very well in Tallahassee last week. They were neck and neck with Florida State, held a 7-6 halftime lead. In the second half, though, they got outscored 35-14. Gave up a lot of yards in terms of run support. They're going to be playing a very physical defense and offensive lines in Boston College. This is a Boston College team that is averaging 206 rushing yards per game. Very solid in terms of creating sacks. 19 sacks on the year. Very physical, blue-collar type of team that likes to run the football. You look at this Louisville team, the inexperience at the wide receiver position is hurting this team. Jackson did have a big day at the quarterback position, put up 307 yards, but emotionally, where is this team going to be as they come back home? Now that's their fourth loss on the year. They're 2-4. They do play an ACC opponent in Boston College, but I like the way Boston College plays. Played Clemson very tough last week. This was a high-octane offense in the Clemson Tigers, and more importantly, were able to score 17 points on that Clemson Tiger defense. I think Boston College is poised for the upset. I think it's methodical. I think it's low scoring. But in the end, Boston College does get a 20-17 victory on the road in Louisville. They knocked the Cardinals off to 2-5. I just think that Boston College has the defense to play with Louisville, create some problems for Jackson. And keep in mind, Boston College played Florida State, Northern Illinois, and Duke prior to that game last week against Clemson. They were the #1 ranked statistical defense, only allowing 140 total yards per game. Very solid in run support. I think they're able to make Louisville one-dimensional, and I do think that Boston College gets the 20-17 victory this coming weekend on the road. Another interesting matchup, Virginia plays North Carolina. It's a rivalry game. Virginia coming off a 3-overtime performance victory, 44-38 over ACC opponent Syracuse. They got pushed to the limit. North Carolina is 5-1. Very dynamic quarterback in Marquise Williams. They do look very good offensively, but you look at this Virginia team, I think they're going to be able to run the football against the North Carolina defensive front. There's a North Carolina defense that's allowing over 200 yards rushing per game. I think that's the difference in this matchup. I think North Carolina does get the victory, but I think Virginia keeps it very close from start to finish. In the end, though, North Carolina gets a 33-30 victory over Virginia, but Virginia is in this game from start to finish. Matt Johns will have success. Mike London is on the hot seat, and look for Virginia to carry the momentum of last week into this rivalry game. I think North Carolina gets a very close ball victory, hard fought, 33-30 over the Virginia Cavaliers. Another intriguing matchup, USC takes on Utah. Utah, dominant home victory in back-to-back weeks against California and Arizona State. They trailed that game last week in the fourth quarter, 18-14 against the Sun Devils. They came up with some key stops, key defensive turnovers when they needed them. They shut down Berkovici, and more importantly, Devontae Booker held that team together with 2 fourth-quarter scores. They pulled away in the fourth quarter, 34-18, to get the Pac-12 victory. They now have to go on the road to the Coliseum. This is a very tough matchup for Utah because USC can stretch Utah's secondary vertically. Cal had great success over the middle of the field. Jared Goff did throw 5 interceptions, but they were in that game from start to finish. You look at Cody Kessler, 590 total yards of offense last week, USC. They put up 400 total yards on a very solid Notre Dame secondary. They rushed for 150 last week, so this is a USC offense that has the capability of putting pressure on Travis Wilson and Devontae Booker. You look at Utah overall, they're positive in turnover margin, one of the best marks in the country with a plus 12 turnover margin, which is a main reason why they are undefeated. But their main offense revolves solely around running back Devontae Booker. He's the leading receiver on the team with 23 receptions. He's also the leading rusher on the team. As Devontae Booker goes, so does that Utah offense. I think if USC is able to score early, put the pressure on Travis Wilson, force Utah to play catch-up, I think that could be a long day for the Utes. And I like the speed and athleticism of the Trojans at home. I do think that they get the victory. I think it's by 10 points over Utah this weekend. I think it's high scoring, and I think USC is able to duplicate the performance that they had last week from an offensive perspective. I think they get the 45-35 victory over Utah. I think they jump up early, never look back, and get a 10-point victory over the Utes this coming weekend. Another intriguing matchup is Alabama and Tennessee. Third Saturday of October. It's a rivalry game. Tennessee coming off an emotional victory 2 weeks ago over Georgia. They trailed that game 24-3, down by 21. They were able to pull that victory out 38-31 over the Bulldogs. They now have an extra week to prepare. Alabama's dominated the series over the last 5 games. The Crimson Tide is 5-0 by an average margin of victory of 28.4 points per game. But keep in mind, last year, this was a game that Alabama jumped up 27-0 on Tennessee. That's when Josh Dobbs came into the game in the second half. He created a lot of problems for that Crimson Tide secondary, rushing on the perimeter, gave that defense and Reggie Ragland fits. Keep in mind also, Tennessee rushed for 181 yards in that loss last year to the Crimson Tide. So they were able to move the football. Jalen Hurd and Josh Dobbs are a year older. I know this is not a dominant Tennessee defense, but I think the extra week to prepare will benefit Butch Jones. And I look for Tennessee to be in this game from start to finish. I don't think they get the outright victory on the road in Tuscaloosa, but I think they're able to keep it very close. I think, though, in the end, Alabama gets a 27-20 victory over Tennessee in a hard-fought game. Should be a interesting battle, to say the least. Last game is Penn State and Maryland. Penn State coming off a disappointing 38-10 loss in Columbus in the Horseshoe. I told you last week, I thought it was a very difficult matchup for the Penn State offensive line because they weren't able to open things up. Entering that matchup, they were allowing 19 sacks. 10 of those came in the week 1 matchup to Temple. They did, though, last week surrender 5 sacks to that solid Ohio State defensive front. Were able to keep it close early, but in the end, Ohio State did roll for the 38-10 victory. But Penn State is playing very well on the defensive side of the ball. They lead the FBS in total sacks with 27. They have a solid defensive tackle and defensive end, Carl Nassib, that leads that team with 11.5 sacks. He's a dual threat player. They can play him inside, play him outside, has speed off the edge that can create a lot of problems for opposing tackles. They like to mix them up. He's a dominant pass rusher, and I think he gives Maryland's offensive line a lot of fits in this game. You look at Maryland overall, 2 factors stand out for me. Defensively, they're giving up 196 rushing yards per game to their opponents. Penn State, they're averaging right around 160 rushing yards per game. Barkley did break out for a dominant performance against Ohio State last week. Penn State was able to rush for 195 yards in that loss in the Horseshoe. So I think that this is a solid matchup for Penn State on the road. Secondly, Maryland is minus 11 in turnover margin, which is dead last in the FBS. Worst turnover margin in the country. They're not creating a lot of turnovers, and they're not clean with the football. They're coming out of a bye week. They have a lame duck head coach in Randy Edsall, who was fired. So now, how emotional will this team be coming out of the bye week against a solid defensive team in Penn State? Quarterback Perry Hills is inconsistent in the passing offense, completing less than 50% of his passes. He makes plays on the edge of the defense, but I think Penn State matches up very well in terms of offense going up against that Maryland defense. I think they're able to put pressure from an offensive perspective on Hills. I think Hackenberg has a solid afternoon, and I think they're able to make plays against the Maryland defense. Keep in mind, Maryland last year beat Penn State in Happy Valley 20-19. Penn State still 5-2 on the year, have the opportunity to go to a solid bowl. I like James Franklin as coach, and I think Penn State does get a dominant road victory this coming weekend. I think it's close early, but in the end, I do think Penn State breaks out for the 28-10 road victory over Maryland. They move on to 6-2 and get a Big Ten victory on the road. Should be a very interesting week at college football. Catch my radio show this coming Saturday on Yahoo Sports Radio, 10 a.m. through 11 a.m. Eastern Time. We'll break down the top 25 matchups. Outside of these games, should be another great weekend of college football. Catch all of my work on goforthe2.com. College football is the best. I love talking about it. Stay with me.